sea of red, it's time for another Fireside Chat, the official podcast of Flames fans. It's go time.
Well, I'm Dan alongside Matt, and we are back for another Fireside Chat episode, another week of Flames hockey. And Matt, how'd you feel about this week overall?
I thought the Flames had a good road trip and played solid really in all four games this week.
Let's talk about the first game. The first game was played, we didn't talk about last week, but it's the Edmonton Oilers game. The Calgary Flames had the Edmonton Oilers in the Saddledome. You and I were at Boat River Brewing with a bunch of our listeners, 16 people playing trivia with us, so congratulations to our winners and everyone that came out to play. It was a lot of fun to see you all, but disappointed in the room. I think we had one Oilers fan who was there, and she was very happy, but the rest of us...
There was two Oiler fans, and they were both very happy at the end of the game, but...
I was trying to tune out how many there were. 4-2 loss for the Flames in this one. Matt, share your thoughts on this one first.
Well, I thought the Flames came out flat, as they have done basically every single game this season, and they got down early, and then in the second period, they, like they do pretty much every game, turn it on, and fought their way back to a tie, and then Marty Pospisil took a bad penalty in the third period late, and that resulted in the Hyman goal, the game winner, and that was the ball game.
It feels to me like, I don't know, there was a lack of discipline in this one. Like you said, they came out flat in the first. They got a little bit behind, both on the scoreboard and I think with the mental aspect of the game. And it just felt like they never were able to get back to that. They were not able to be as crisp as they needed to all night. I thought that they just looked like a team that was trailing, both mentally and on the ice all night.
Yeah, and they were trying, and like they did eventually fight back to tie the game, but there was no sustained pressure after that point to push it either to overtime or to actually win the game in regulation. And then they gave up the power play goal, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they weren't that crisp. Even when they fought back to tie it, it felt like, I don't know, it didn't feel like they were... Maybe they're trying a little too hard is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and frankly, Edmonton is a little on the terrible side defensively, and has been just all season. So
have been for many seasons.
Yes, but even more so this year because the handful of players that actually know how to play defensively are now on other teams. So, yeah.
What, you're saying your compensation picks aren't going to play defense?
Exactly. So, yeah, and it was one of those that like the Flames definitely took advantage of their spotty defense to get a couple goals, but it wasn't quite enough, and it happens.
And then the Flames went on the road after that. They went to Montreal, where Matt Coronato beat the Montreal Canadiens 3-2. Coronato, I would say, is probably the only Flame probably really that stood out to me in this game. He got 2 goals. Obviously, Zari gets 1, but I think we can probably single-handedly say that Coronato won this one.
Well, after last week where we were saying that like he needs to get into those spots to shoot, and he's not quite there yet, and he just needs to be a little bit more assertive in his play. But like the day after that our show aired, he did just that. And
after getting called up, Matt, he was listening to us on the long walk from one dressing room to the other.
Exactly. I don't know how that took an hour, but hey, everybody goes at their own pace.
Maybe he had to stop in the lounge, get something to eat, that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Or, stop at the bathroom. A lot of people listen to podcasts there. I won't judge. But anyway, yeah, I mean, this was a good Flames win. Obviously, this went to OT. And, if we're going to give away a point, sure, let's give away a point to the East. Like, I got no problem with that at all. Dan Vladar made 24 saves in this one. I thought Dustin Wolf, 24 saves. Vladar didn't play in this one. I got one ahead on my stats. I thought Wolf looked good. I thought, as much as I said that the only guy that really looked good was Coronato, he was the offensive powerhouse here. But I thought that for the most part, the forwards looked good enough. Nobody really stood out as having a really amazing game to me besides Coronato.
Yeah, and the Flames, Wolf has been other than the one game against Utah, like he has basically been a dominant starter in every game that he's played.
Yeah.
And like the reason why the Flames either win or get the games to overtime is largely due to his efforts.
Let's be honest, Montreal's not a good team, right? Like, I thought Calgary went and played good enough to beat Montreal, but this was not a fantastic game.
Oh, and Montreal is kind of on the terrible side and a little bit disjointed. Like you can tell that they're kind of on the slow track to like a full teardown rebuild. And, you know, like they don't have a lot of parts that actually fit in terms of, you know, a team trying to make the playoffs. So, like the fact that the Flames came out on top isn't really surprising. I felt that like Montreal is probably the easiest opponent they have until the very end of the month when they play Columbus and Pittsburgh. So, like, you know, if you're going to get 2 points, this was kind of the game that you would expect to get 2 points.
Exactly. And then the Flames played Boston, a team that is always a perennial top team in the league. Again, took it to overtime, which I think is pretty impressive here. Boston won it with 20 seconds left, and Calgary gets 2 goals in the third here. Pretty good game overall. I thought the Flames, I thought they could get blown out by Boston. Like when I was looking at this road trip, I thought this is one that we could really look back at and be upset with the way the Flames played. I thought that this was a good example of when this team wants to play well, they can compete with the top teams.
Yeah, and to be frank, like I felt that the Flames matched the Bruins pretty much from the opening puck drop through the end of the game. And like even though they went down 3-1 at one point, the goals seemed to come off of just fortunate bounces for Boston more so than like what the hell are you doing defensively or the goaltender being out of position, those kind of plays. You know, and then once again the Flames battle back like they, you know, do, and especially in the third period, and they force it to overtime, and if not for a bad play by Anderson behind the net, that game probably goes to a shootout. And, you know, you're in coin toss territory, but Marchand got 2 free whacks at it, and Wolf stopped the first one, but not much you can do when you're kind of hung out to dry on that.
I think this is the first time all season that we saw the same goalie twice in a row, isn't it?
No, Vladar had 2 back-to-back, and Wolf had 2 back-to-back. So they're on the same rotation now. It's just
okay.
They, you know, switched the order of the 2 games up. That's all.
And credit to Tyson Barrie, who gets his first goal of the year and first goal as a Flame in this one. A pretty good shot from the blue line on a right off a face-off that was taken by Justin Kirkland. So that was kind of fun to see that he's in the lineup and getting scoring chances.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that it was good on Barrie to wait for the defender to come up enough to screen the goaltender and then fire it right under his blocker. And there was nothing Pospisil could do on that shot.
It's those little things that you expect from a veteran.
Exactly. Like, there was no rush on Barrie's part to just get the puck off. He waited until the guy got into the right position to block Pospisil's vision and then rifled it right in the right spot to make it go in.
And then the last game of this week is the Calgary Flames going to Buffalo and taking on the Sabres. This was the afternoon game on Saturday. They never do great in matinees, and this is no exception.
Every game in Buffalo is a match between 2 teams who try to outsuck each other. And like they only had like 10 shots each after 2 periods. Like, the game was a lot more up-tempo than previous ones where it's like, I can't make a 3-foot pass. And that's for both teams. But I don't know what it is about going to Buffalo, but the Flames always look terrible in games like this. They did make a third period push back again to tie it late. And
Coronato scored in the second and Backlund scored in the third. And,
they fell in a shootout, but it's just the same. Every game in Buffalo, for whatever reason, is just the exact same story.
Buffalo should be a team that we should be able to beat, but like it always feels like we play Buffalo in the afternoon. I'd have to go back and see if that's true, but that feels like we always play Buffalo in the afternoon, and it's never a good game.
No, it's always terrible. I don't know what it is, but like even going back to like 2006, 2007, like all those games, like forward, every game in Buffalo has just been noticeably like a terrible, sloppy game by both teams, and usually very low scoring, like 0-0 heading into overtime, 1-1 or 2-2. Like it's just never an interesting game for whatever reason.
Kind of lousy hockey.
Yeah.
Well, with that, the 4 games, the Flames come off their road trip, their quick road trip to the East, and now the Calgary Flames are sitting 4th in the Pacific Division, technically tied for 3rd, but 4th in the Pacific Division. The Vegas Golden Knights have 20 points at number 1, LA has 19 points at 2, Vancouver has 17 points at 3, and Calgary, after 15 games, is 7-5-3 for 17 points, so tied for that 3rd spot. And, you know, as much as, like we said, we only really got 1 win this week, the Flames were able to pick up pretty much a point in every game.
Yeah, and getting 4 out of 6 on a road trip, you take that every day of the week, and it's one of those things that the Flames are consistently putting the effort in. The talent is not quite up to snuff. Like if they actually had the talent to back it up, they would be one of the best teams in the NHL. But it's good to see that the team is putting the proper efforts in and game out, even if they aren't getting results all the time.
And just to finish our look at the Pacific Division here, this is the part that I like the best. Edmonton, remember, Calgary's at 17. Edmonton, 13 points. We have a significant lead over Edmonton, which I didn't think we would at this point. Seattle also 13, and then Anaheim and San Jose tied for 10. So there is a possibility here in the next week that San Jose could overtake Edmonton.
Please do, because that would be funny.
I would love that. That would be so funny. Let's not talk about San Jose and Edmonton, though. Let's talk about the rest of Flames week. I guess the big story for me was the Anthony Mantha injury. Anthony Mantha now placed in the IR, and Dryden Hunt recalled from the American League to fill for him. I heard a lot of people online talking about why Hunt, why not Peltier, why not one of the young guys, Kieran's, guys like that. To me, Dryden Hunt is the perfect call-up. It's sort of like the Kirkland call-up. This is not a guy you need playing every day. This is a guy that you can afford to put on the bench and not have playing every day, and we know what we've got with him. We saw that Huska liked Dryden Hunt last year. Dryden Hunt was here for, I think, pretty much the whole time after I'd have to double check to make sure, but I think the whole time after the deadline last year, he worked well. I think this was a great move.
Yeah, and realistically, it's early in the season. Like if we're in February and Mantha goes on the IR, you'd probably see Peltier instead, or insert young player here instead. But you're trying to get all of the guys down there to have a good runway of consistently playing in certain roles so they can learn how to be NHLers. You don't need to disrupt them when they're trying to figure out their own game.
Yeah, and that's where I think a lot of times fans, you and I talked about this, we don't have to keep talking about it, but fans keep wanting to see this guy in the NHL or that guy in the NHL or things like that. And I think there's something to be said about consistency, right? Of having having your team and have those guys play night in, night out with the same guys, like you said, the same role, the same partners, knowing what needs to happen. And especially when you have the Wranglers hot as they are. I mean, after 12 games, they're 10-2. I wouldn't want to be disturbing that chemistry.
No, exactly. And, if it's working down there, just kind of let it rip. And, you're not playing any of the guys that you'd call up likely anyway. Like, I do not expect Hunt to, join any of the games until Mantha's back.
And that's why I think it's the right call up, like I said, because for that guy to sit on the bench, that's the guy you want to do it.
Yeah, because it's vastly more important that Peltier plays 18 minutes down with the Wranglers than sitting in the press box eating popcorn. It just matters more for his game to get those opportunities.
Exactly. I mean, when I look at the forwards that were available to be called up, you don't want Honzeg. Stromgren doesn't make sense. Morton doesn't make sense. Kieran's doesn't make sense. Maybe Dewar, maybe Martin Ferk, Clark Bishop, but I think for me it would be one of either Ferk, Bishop or Hunt. Like, you want one of those kind of veteran guys that can sit on the bench.
Yeah, and Hunt has the flexibility that he can play all three forward positions, so it does give the Flames options in case anybody else gets banged up in the interim, that we can just plug and play him on left wing, center, right wing, who cares?
Exactly.
Just throw him in there.
Yeah, so I think, when we bring up a call-up like this, fans have to really look at what is the impact of that call-up and what's the expectation. Is that guy going to be playing every game until Mantha's back? Is that guy going to be sitting on the bench? And, the GM is thinking the same thing when he's deciding who to call up. If we needed an everyday NHLer for 2 weeks, I think it may not have been Hunt. But when we just need a guy who can be number 13, Hunt was the right call.
Well, and especially, it's not like Mantha's going to be out for 2 months. If you're
he's week to week, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he's going to probably be out for the same time Sharon Govich is, give or take, 2 to 3 weeks. But, it's not like a multi-month injury. And if that was the case, then I could see, somebody who's, on the cusp getting a full-time spot for the duration until he's better. But, with it being, whomever is going to only be up here for, 5 games might play 1. It does not make sense to bring up anybody that's vital for their development to come and sit for a bit instead.
And even if you want to put a guy in for that 1, there's no reason you couldn't send Hunt down, call Pelte up for the 1 game, and then swap him again.
Exactly.
So, yeah, this was, to me, when I saw this call up, knowing where the roster's, I thought, like I said, either him, Bishop's doing pretty well this year, so I didn't, and he's the captain, so it wouldn't be him, but either him or Ferk. I thought, yeah, those are your 2 kind of old tweener guys you bring in.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about guys who've been called up, Matt Coronato, you and I talked a little bit about him last week and how we thought going to the American League was the right thing for him. Matt, we were wrong, I guess.
Well, it's one of those things that how he's played this week has been different from how he's been playing up until this week. And, he's getting into the areas that he needs to in order to generate scoring chances. And, earlier this season, you would not have seen him peel off the wall to shoot the puck like he did to tie the game in Montreal. You would not have seen him creatively take the guy's stick in overtime and then get to the right spot for that kind of shot. And you wouldn't have seen him driving the net for the tap-in the Buffalo game. And it's things like that where he's making adjustments to his game, which, I think we both felt that was more important for him to do in the minors. But, if he can learn that at the pro level, that's perfect as well, because, he then becomes a dangerous offensive threat at the NHL. Oh, no.
This version of Coronato looks like an NHL regular. My question is, does this version of Coronato continue? He's been streaky in the past. He's been a little inconsistent in his NHL time. If this version of him can stay for, the remainder of the season, great. But I think that if he goes back to, the way we saw him at the beginning of the season, I think he will end up back in the American League.
Yeah, it's one of those where he needs to take that next step because he has the shot where he can be a 35, 40 goal scorer. If, much like Mike Camilleri was, because they're very similar players. And, if he can learn how to be consistently going to those right spots to take his shot, because his shot is just that deadly, he can score from anywhere. That will be important for him and will cause him to get top 6 minute ice time instead of, 4th line here, 3rd line there, that kind of thing. And, him scoring 3 goals in his last 3 games, that will boost your ice time, and he's got to just keep making the most of it. And it's not necessarily scoring every game, but, getting into those places where he can get a good shot off here and there or make a good pass. And as long as he's consistently doing those things, the points will come. But, he needs to be consistently doing those things, and that's the problem that we've seen to this point.
And we're seeing Coronato playing online right now with Backlund and Coleman. So I think the coaching staff is setting him up to be the offensive driver on that line. That's really, like you said, where he's excelling. He's got that shot. So they're giving him, I would say, every chance to succeed. It's just a matter of, what he's going to do with it.
Yeah, and to his credit, having 5 goals in 15 games thus far this season, that's pretty damn good. Like, you're on pace for 25 over the course of the season. If you keep at this pace, like that's if he gets that kind of goal total, I think every single Flames fan will be thrilled with that. It's just he has to continually show that he can, produce at a roughly that clip, give or take.
Exactly, yeah. So I think, this is, right now, he's looking great. He looks like he belongs here. But I think this is his spot to lose right now.
Yep. And much like Connor Zary last year, where, we're like, oh, well, he's doing great now. Can he keep it up? And then he did for most of last season and into this year. It'll be just interesting to see, if we're going to get this, great one game, invisible the next version, which we've seen to this point in the NHL, or is this actually the turning point in his NHL career where he is now done with the AHL and is moving into premier NHL scorer guy?
And at the same time, I don't think this has to be his turning point. Like, I think there's still some time. If this isn't it, you could put him in the American League for the rest of this year. You could put him in the American League for part of next year, I'd even say. Like, it's not like, to me anyways, it's not like this is make or break.
Oh, no. And, like he can go back to being inconsistent again, but, it'll be just interesting to see because he is seeming to be getting into those higher danger areas now, where he was kind of tentative at the NHL to this point. He was doing the right things when he was in the AHL, and that's why he was scoring so often. But like once he got to the NHL, he was very much more tentative, and we're not seeing that same hesitancy from him. So it'll be nice to see if he can keep it up, because that would be a huge boon for the Flames moving forward if he can actually develop into a prime scorer for this team.
Another guy I wanted to talk to you about this week is Marty Pospisil. And we're not seeing the same Marty Pospisil we saw last year. He's not the same player. I'd say he's not as effective. This week we saw him centering a line with Huberdeau and Kuzmenko. And I think the challenge has been putting him at center. Like, Marty's played center pretty much, I think, every game now that he's been in, at least started at center. I don't think he's a center.
No, and his overall play has diminished. And like when he was being the wrecking ball last year, it was because he was on the wing and he was able to go crash behind the net. But when he's having to be the center, he has to be up from the goalie more to be the defensively responsible guy on the line. And it's basically neutering his game for what made him effective in the first place, was to be the guy who crashes and bangs here and there. And it makes sense to try him there because he's 6'4", and if you can turn him into a center, that helps. But it also currently seems to be too much for him, and his overall game is diminishing to the point where I kind of view him as now a bubble player on this team, much like Walker Duehr in his second year as a Flame, where it's okay, I guess this guy is in the NHL, but he could be replaced imminently by a dozen players at this point. And if guys like Peltier, Honzik, and Cairns continue to play well, you might see Pospisil drop out of the lineup.
And I don't think you want Pospisil to change his game to become a center. He made the league with a specific set of skills, and I think you need to get him using those skills.
Yeah, and it doesn't hurt to get him to round out his game more and be a good two-way player. But when you're taking the bread and butter of how he plays out of his hands, he is not that talented of a player, where he can survive just off of his skill set.
Would have been asking Brian McGrattan or Tim Hunter or something like that to go center a line.
Yeah, it's like Michael Furland when he was here. He was only effective when he was crashing and banging, and like when he ran into injury troubles, he became a lot less effective. And, Pospisil needs to play on that edge if he wants to be an NHL player. And being a center is not allowing him to do that.
To me, if you want to experiment with centers, they should try Connor Zary there. I mean, obviously they want him to be a winger because they've kept him there. But the other guy that I think you could play around with here is promoting Justin Kirkland up the lineup as a center. We saw him center that or take that face-off that we talked about earlier when Barry scored. I think he's a better option than Pospisil.
Yeah, and realistically, like what I would like to see is Pospisil on the fourth line with Lomberg as being the two wingers. With
that's kind of what I'm getting
at.
If your fourth line is Rooney, Lomberg, and Pospisil, and then if you just switch those guys, then your second line, let's call it, would be Huberdeau, Kirkland, Kuzmenko.
Which is okay. Like, ideally you would have somebody else there, and like realistically,
but they don't have another center body.
Well, realistically, the only guy you could shoehorn into that would be Sharon Govich, because he actually did play well enough last year as a center. It, again, was not ideal circumstances.
No, but also if we're in a rebuilding year, it doesn't have to be the best choice.
True.
Right? But I think Pospisil needs to be put in a position to succeed.
Yeah, and right now he's not, and he's, frankly, it's kind of like when Sam Bennett was in the start of his career, where the only time you'd notice him was when he was taking dumb penalties.
Yeah.
And realistically, like Pospisil this season, the only time I've really noticed him outside of a couple of games at the beginning of the year is when he's taken really dumb offensive zone penalties, and costs the team because he's not just not in the flow of the game properly.
Yep. No, it's something that I think we've tried it. It was worth a try, and the Flames have tried it, and now it's like, okay, we've tried this. It's time to move on. It's time to find someone else, whether that's, again, another player on the lineup, whether that's Kirkland, whether that's, Sharon Govich. I think Pospisil needs to be moved to the wing as soon as he can.
Yeah, it's gotten to the point where you have to shake it up, because he's been the worst of all of the forwards in my opinion. And
I agree.
Even Kevin Rooney I would have in the lineup over him level of he's not doing anything other than taking bad penalties, and he's not throwing hits, he's not engaging in the play, he's not talented enough to be a dynamic scoring threat. He's just literally filling a top 9 roster spot when, he's basically playing like a 13th forward right now. And, it's not fair to his development or the team, frankly, to have him dragging his line mates down, because it's hard for Huberdeau to create offense when, Pospisil's basically playing like a black hole.
And also, I don't think, again, for the skill set that he has, that's the skill set you need with Kuzmenko and Huberdeau.
Yeah. Well, and you look at Huberdeau, he's only had one assist in his last 10 games or something like that. And, if you're defending Huberdeau, that 90% of the time he's going to pass. If you know that one of the two guys on his line is not very good, you're going to be focusing on the other guy who's actually good. And, the Pospisil cannot generate plays by himself. So, you know what I mean? His way of generating offense last year was causing havoc, which caused players to make mistakes and then pouncing on those mistakes. And
exactly,
he can't just do it by himself. And so it's making Huberdeau less effective. He's making Kuzmenko or whomever the other guy is, whether it's Mantha or him, less effective. It's just you're sewering the line for no reason. And I get the whole concept of trying it out, but we're 15 games in, and he's been absolutely terrible. Yeah.
And even when I look at this, okay, Justin Kirkland is listed as a center. He can play some center. Do I think he's a second, third line center? No, but he's better than Pospisil. But if you want to convert a winger, convert Kuzmenko, convert somebody like that to center instead of Pospisil.
Yeah, like realistically, the Flames have, you can throw Kuzmenko, you can throw Sharangovich, you can throw Zari up the middle, and like their game's not predicated on, crashing and banging in order to create havoc to score goals. Like they're all finesse enough players where they can.
Even Coleman could work.
Yeah, like you can navigate with any of those guys in that role where their bread and butter is their overall play, not, their shtick, so to speak. And, it's just disappointing because, a guy like Pospisil, he is really good when he's put in this position to succeed. And like right now, he's not. And, it's causing both himself and his line mates and frankly the team to not be as good because of misusing him, frankly.
Yep. So let's hope that changes by game 20. Like you said, it was worth trying, and we tried it. It doesn't work. Let's find another guy. But if Kirkland's going to stay here, I think he's worth giving a shot to.
Yep. And like he's been rather effective at Mike Gold. He mentioned that reminded him a lot of Jamie Lundmark when he'd come up and just, be effective generally, no matter what line he was on. And, Kirkland just seems to be that kind of player where he does everything just well enough where, he's a good foil for everybody else and not like taking away from anything.
I mean, at this point in the season, I'd even put Dryden Hunt at center instead of Pospisil.
I agree.
They need somebody who's played that position and like you said, has the type of game that lets you be a centerman. So I'm surprised this has lasted as long as it has.
Yeah, and like to me, like the natural fit with Lomberg on the fourth line being the two guys, big and small to crash them all, makes a lot of sense because they both play the same, balls to the wall.
Yeah, I mean, when I was looking at the lines at the beginning of the season and penciling in who goes where, to me, it's almost like, the Flames have stapled Coleman to Backlund. I thought they would staple Pospisil to Lomberg.
Yeah, because they both play the same way. Let them both create havoc and have the center, whomever that is, be, right there in front just to, shovel whatever pucks that come out in front at the net. Like,
and, as much as I don't think Kevin Rooney's a top 6-4 center, I mean, give it a shot. Put Rooney on, line 2 with those guys. Like, it can't be worse than Pospisil.
No, and again, it's not to say that, we hate Pospisil. It's just that he's not being utilized right. And, that's what's causing the problem. Yeah, I mean, I want to see
Pospisil in the lineup, but I don't want to see him as a center, especially a second-line center.
No.
So put him where he can be effective and keep him there. And my worry, though, is that they're going to keep Pospisil at second or at center, and he's not going to be effective, and then he's going to get dealt or not renewed because, he wasn't working out.
Yeah, and realistically, like, it's entirely on the coaching staff misusing him to this point. Like, and I get it. You want to give him some runway to try and learn the position because, hey, if he does, then, that's found money. You have a young 6'4" center who can, be a havoc maker, but, it's not worked and it has not shown any upward trajectory of working. It's just getting even worse, frankly, with each passing game. And it's like, when is this going to end?
And hopefully, when a Mantha trade comes, when a Kuzmenko trade comes this year, that the Flames will bring back a capable center body. Because when I look at this forward lineup, that's really the number one thing they're missing.
Oh, yeah. And that's organizationally. Like, there are no good centers, organizationally, even in the prospect pool. Like, Kieran's is the only guy that kind of is, but he's short. And, not likely to stick.
Well, he's short, but he's also having his first good season. Like, he's never looked fantastic before. I mean, it's sort of like saying, Walker Duehr looks good. Well, we know what the NHL Walker Duehr looked like. So, yeah, I think, when you look at it, I mean, if I look at the guys listed center on the Wranglers lineup, Ilya Nikolaev is not the answer. Clark Bishop is not the answer.
Exactly. Like, those are, like, all fill-in fourth-line centers, and Kieran's being so small, at the NHL level, he is not going to be a center. Like, if he does actually translate into like your scoring winger type guy, like he's going to be like a second, third line left winger, not a center. Like, it's
Sam Morton is not the answer at this point.
No, again, like another guy that's like a fill-in fourth line guy, not anybody projectable up the lineup.
And Honzig is being listed as a center left for the Wranglers, but I don't think that's the right move right now either.
No, he needs to just keep learning, whether that's at wing or at center, but that's not an imminent fix. Like, the guy is still 19, so that's not anytime soon, frankly.
No, and I think this is an organizational need, like you said. And last year we saw the Flames get their defenseman in Parekh, right? They've got that future defenseman now. We saw them
even guys that they traded for at the deadline, whether it was Grushnikov, Yurmo, Brustevich, like they managed to backfill a lot of positions before the draft and then drafted a whole bunch of guys too. So
and
now
Gridin, Matvei Gridin is not the center of the future. That was their other first round pick. So I think they need to go out this year and really be looking at center depth.
Yes, whether that's trading off guys that are more higher impact, like a guy like Rasmus Andersson, or even guys like Mantha, etc. Like, I don't think you would return a center prospect for them, but whatever draft picks you get for like Kuzmenko or Mantha, or
I think you could definitely get a center prospect. It might not be an A prospect, but it could be a B prospect that we could develop.
Yeah, but like
I don't think Yurmo is an A prospect either.
No, but like guys that might actually profile to be an NHL player, I think that like you need to draft those guys primarily.
You do, yeah. But I mean, if we're saying we have none, you need to just backfill some of that too.
True. Yeah, just getting organizational depth.
Yeah, the more of them you have, the more chance you have that one of them works out, right? Let's say Kirkland doesn't want to stay or Rooney doesn't want to stay. You still need to fill that role. So I think that if you can if they try to pick up a center in every trade this year, sort of like it seemed like they tried to pick up a defenseman in every trade last year, I think you have enough bodies here that maybe one of them turns out, and then you also add one through a draft pick. I mean, we're going to have a couple first-round picks this year. Use both of them on a center, use your second on a center. Like, they just, I think, need to start putting some center bodies, whether a prospect or not. We just need center bodies in this organization.
Yeah, like the Flames have 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and 2 thirds as of like right now. We have 3 technically in the first, but one's going to Montreal, yada yada yada. But like whomever, like whatever draft picks you get in trade, throw that on the pile and like.
Well, and I'd even be willing to forego a draft pick and trade. Let's say the Mantha pick or the Mantha trade, which we know will probably come with the deadline, and I think we're all anticipating a second or a third. Forego the pick because we have them and bring back the prospect.
Yeah, it just depends on like who and what is available, but realistically, like even if you're looking even further ahead, like free agency next year, if there's any UFAs that are on the young-ish side that are centers, I wouldn't mind throwing a contract at somebody, even if it's like a second, third line guy, just to another body for the interim until.
Yeah, and even if not a young guy, I think you could do the Mantha deal for a centerman. You could go out and find that guy who struggled this year. You bring him in on a 1 year. At least you have a capable center to work with some younger wingers.
True. And just, keep flipping it over until you develop, and thankfully, like, this draft has a number of good centers available.
But even that's a 3-4 year out fix.
Oh yeah, for sure. But like getting guys like Parekh and Gradin and Basha into the organization, like at least if they can say like with their 6 top 3 round picks, if they pick up 4 or 5 centers with those picks, and really stock the cupboards, that will benefit the team over the long term. It's just like they just need to start throwing like everything at the center position for now and the future.
Yeah, and this is not meant to be a slight to Rory Cairns because I think he's a good hockey player, but when Rory Cairns is your best AHL centerman, you need more centermen.
Yeah, and again, that's not a slight to him. It's like realistically, he's a late round draft pick who's 23. Like, no matter how good you are, unless you're already in the NHL by that time, like, you should be already making an impact at the NHL. So if you're the best of what's coming up, like, that's not good.
Yeah, well, and even if we look at him, right, he came up, this is a guy who played pretty much most of the 2023-24 season in the ECHL, right? He came up in 23-24 to the AHL, had 32 points in 54 games, and this year has 12 and 12. Like, he's a good centerman, don't get me wrong, but he, to me, is your second-line AHL centerman.
I agree. And, it's sort of like the guy that they got for Pedersen last year off of Dallas. I can't remember his name. But, just like a filler.
Riley Damiano?
Yeah. Like just the filler middle depth guy at the AHL level. Like, he's not imminently pressing for an NHL job.
And even if he looks great this year, I think he's in a position where, okay, you looked great because we didn't have a better guy. How would you look, if we had a better guy?
Yeah, and I would, and if he keeps it up all year, I would not be opposed to letting him have a game or two at the NHL level to, like, okay, you had a good year,
but
this is what you actually have to.
Yeah, I think that could be deflating though for the prospect as well.
Well, it's one of those sink or swim, buddy, and. And this is what it's going to take if you actually want to make the leap to the NHL, and do you have it in you? And some do, a lot don't. And, it's one of those where, realistically, like, the Flames are going to have to start, turning the organization over, either promoting guys to the NHL or cutting bait. And, so,
yeah, and this year, next year, I think for the next couple of years, they also, you mentioned Anderson. If we just look at expiring contracts, they've got a couple this year, they've got Coleman in a couple of years, like, they've got enough veterans coming up that even if you just move the expiring guys, you'll always be able to bring in some prospect talent for at least the next 3-4 years.
Oh, for sure. And even if say a guy who's under a little bit of a longer term contract like Nazem Kadri wants out at any point, like, he will return a first round pick plus because he's still producing at the amount that's his contract is perfectly valid for his play. So it's one of those things where whether it's a bigger type deal like that or moving Anderson or Backlund or insert forward here, there's enough there where you can continually get like top 90 picks for so like we have like 2 or 3 every year, like through 27, 28 type of thing.
Well, and I think sometimes we overvalue picks. Like, I think there's something to be said about knowing the prospect you're going to get and getting a guy that you have scouted instead of waiting to see who falls to you in the draft.
True. And it just depends on basically what is available at the market at the time. Like, the Flames made out like bandits with the Lindholm trade, where they managed to kind of do all of the things in one fell swoop. And other times where you kind of just have to get a piece here and there, like the Tanev trade where you're getting a good defensive prospect and a mid-round pick. Mid-second round pick.
They'll get there, right? But they just need to start. They need to start bringing in centermen.
Yep.
Matt, I think that about wraps us up for this week with Flames news. You ready to look ahead?
Definitely.
We didn't do well last week. The Flames are back at home this week. 3 games in the Saddle Dome. 2 games in the Saddle Dome and 1 on the road. On Monday, the 11th, Remembrance Day, they have a 6:30 p.m. game, an earlier one. That's their first game on Amazon Prime. I'm going to be curious to see what a Flames game on Amazon Prime looks like. And that's with the LA Kings in town. Then they have a back-to-back going just down the road to Vancouver for an 8 p.m. start on Tuesday, and then back to the Dome for the 15th. And that's the Nashville Predators coming to town. Are you a Prime subscriber?
Yep.
Have you watched any games on Prime yet?
Not one.
No.
I didn't even know that this game was on Prime, to be honest, because I don't look ahead until like the day of. So.
Yeah, all their Monday games I think are on Prime this year, because the Kings one is, the one on the 25th in Ottawa is. So I don't even know who like the broadcast team on Prime or anything is. It'll be interesting to see how it's presented, and I would imagine presented without commercials.
Yeah, it reminds me of like the old PvP games.
Oh yeah, I forgot about the pay-per-view. That was a weird experiment.
Yes.
And they weren't that good at games either.
No.
Like I could see if you kind of put the Battle of Alberta behind a paywall or something like that, but if I remember there's some weird games, like why would I pay for this?
Yeah, like there was a game against Chicago when Chicago was terrible. I remember like there being one in Boston when the Bruins weren't very good, and it's like, okay. Like it just, little nonsensical. So
it'll be interesting to see what happens there. If you don't have Prime, you can sign up for a trial for that. Might be worth signing up for Prime anyways, because it's Black Friday month, but I'll leave that up to our listeners. So, Matt, how do you think the Flames will do in these 3 games this week?
Nashville's kind of terrible, so I would expect
so
them
is Montreal.
Well, and we beat Montreal.
That's
so
true. Yeah,
I'm going to expect to win there, and I think they drop both of the other 2.
So you think they lose LA and Vancouver?
Yes.
I don't know. Before I get there, I hope that the Flames play Seattle on Prime. That should happen at some point, since Amazon's based out of Seattle. I don't know what to make of LA this year. Like, I'm still not sure if they're a good team or not. So I don't know.
It's like they got most of the parts of a good team, and then some where it's like, are you guys rebuilding or like what? Level of like their goaltending is absolutely horrendous, and who
are their goalies this year? I don't even know.
I know Riddick is one of them. I think it's still Talbot, but I'm not 100% sure.
Let me find out. It is. Who's listed as their goalies? Darcy Kemper and David Riddick.
Yeah, there's a good tandem.
That's the issue.
Yeah.
Okay.
Seriously, I would take Vladar easily over either one of them, and I think Vladar is just okay.
Well, I think this will be a discussion for down the road for us in another show. Is how long is Vladar Flame? Because we've got Cooley looking good, but we'll discuss that another time.
Yes.
I'm gonna go. I think Vancouver's going to be the real challenge this week. That's a pretty good team this year. I'm going to say the Flames beat LA and they beat Nashville, but they lose to Vancouver.
Yeah.
That's going to be my prediction here.
Yeah. I think that they have a good chance of winning one of the 2 early in the week, but it's hard to tell because LA can either be really good or really bad. The only reason
they might struggle against LA that I can see is coming off that Eastern road trip and getting adjusted back to the home time zones with an early start. That might be an issue.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm going to be optimistic this week, Matt.
Yes.
Hopefully we'll get David Riddick and we can light him up.
That would be always good.
Yeah, you're right. Nashville, I don't know what they're doing there. I think they're rebuilding, but it feels like they're rebuilding, but they don't want to tell themselves they're rebuilding. And I think Vancouver is going to be a game that I think Calgary's going to try too hard in because of the rivalry, and I think they're going to get themselves in some trouble because of it.
Yeah. Well, Nashville, they were on the cusp of being a good team last year, and so they went out and spent a whole bunch of money, and now are absolutely horrendous. And it's that makes no sense whatsoever, but yet it makes perfect sense.
That's why we spent little money, and now we're good.
Exactly. We have all the cap space, and now we're actually, the feisty team that, is hard to actually put away.
That's right. All right, well, Matt, we'll see how they do this week, and we'll talk to you next Monday. Or, next Sunday, I guess, after these games.
As always, go Flames, go.
Fireside Chat is hosted by Dan Stevenson, co-hosted by Matt DeBorg. This episode produced and edited by Peter Marino. Fireside Chat is licensed under a Creative Commons license. For full license details, visit firesidechat.ca.